Hi, I'm Lonnie Akiona. Welcome back to Akiona Law Podcast, the podcast where we talk about all things that intersect in the areas of family law and divorce. Today, join us for part two with family law and divorce attorney Nathan Kleiber from Seattle Divorce Services. Welcome back to the show, Nathan.
Thanks, Lonnie. It's great to be here again.
Yeah, and we were where we left off. We were on a very interesting discussion of how to create structures or legal structures in terms of polyamorous couples, especially when there's children involved.
Mhm.
And one thing that we had touched about too in the first episode was that collaborative law. And that is a new area that I think a lot of people aren't necessarily familiar with. You do collaborative law.
Mhm.
I am trained as a collaborative law attorney, but for some reason, I feel like in Snohomish County, it's not really being utilized.
Yeah.
So I kind of take that knowledge and training and I try to focus on cooperative divorces when it's applicable. But why don't you tell us a little bit of collaborative divorce and like how does that work with polyamorous couples or just in general?
Yeah. Well, collaborative law, sort of speaking generally. So the formal collaborative, like sort of big C, right? Like this, it's mirrored, right? Big C collaborative is, I mean, as you know, it's the sort of the approach to, theoretically, it could be any kind of legal proceeding,
Right.
conceptually at least, right? I see it because I practice family law, so that's where I see it. And I think it's actually the most popular place to apply it. Basically, at the beginning of the case, both parties, it could be more than two parties without any issues that I can see, hires a collaboratively trained attorney and sometimes
Right.
some other professionals sort of help as a support team. But the basis is we sign on to an agreement right up front saying we're absolutely not taking this case to court. The court has to sign off on the final documents because that's the only way you get a binding order. But we're not going to ask them to make any decisions. And we're all promising not to. We're all promising to be completely transparent. We're all promising that we're all going to watch out for everybody's best interests. We're all promising to talk openly with each other whenever we think it could be helpful. Essentially taking the litigation out of, in this case, the divorce most often.
Right.
And saying, we're I mean, in essence, it's saying, gosh darn it, we're all going to sit down in a room like adults and figure this out.
With help. With
Right,
help
well,
of
with
a
help, right.
with the help of a certified financial divorce coach or the parenting
Yeah.
coach. And in fact, you and I were in the same collaborative law training class together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's I guess it's actually worth noting that sort of specifically is that there are out there people who say they do collaborative divorce who aren't trained in collaborative divorce. And I'm not saying that that can't work. I am saying that it is a different thing. There's a specific set of trainings and I think in ideal circumstances, memberships in local collaborative bar sections and whatnot. But the notion is that we're going to take this case, whatever is going on in this case, and we're going to deal with it like humans, like grown-ups to the degree possible, and the professionals are there to help the again, usually two people come to agreements without the sort of scare tactic, the sort of implicit stick as opposed to the carrot of the courts hanging over our heads. And I think it's a fantastic process.
Right.
I'm of the school of thought. I don't think it's for everybody.
It's not.
No. But I've been impressed by the degree of conflict and antagonism that a good collaborative team can sort of absorb and redirect and
Right.
manage. Because the outcomes on collaborative overall, I think both statistically and anecdotally, the outcomes are way more sustainable. The term that people in the field like to use is durable, which is, we see less people coming back to court after their divorce if they did it collaboratively. And in part, I think that's because the agreements that they reach for their divorce are Well, they reached them, right? They worked through whatever issues
Yeah.
were in the way of them coming to an agreement, and they did it. And I think that gives them a little more weight to the individuals involved. But also because even if they do have disagreements later, they're way less likely to take it to the courts because they've already had success in this process, and they've have sort of um, a methodology that they've learned for dealing with their disagreements that is
Right.
has way less risk of becoming nasty, and um, way less risk of becoming absurdly expensive.
And now, do you feel that the life of collaborative case, do you feel like it's shorter or just as equal to the process of the divorce?
You know, in terms of how long the divorce takes, I don't know that I think there's a huge difference
Mm.
on average. I mean, in Washington state, I mean, as you know, there's a 90-day minimum time. A divorce isn't allowed legally to take less than 3 months, because we can't file final orders until the case has been filed and served on the other party for 3 months, right?
Right.
Um,
91st day of date of filing, the date the service is filed.
mhm. Right, right. But I don't know. I don't know what your experience has been, but I think most divorces take more like 6 or 9 months to get through.
Yes,
Um,
I do.
yeah. King County, we can't go that long because we get that case schedule right off the bat, right? I know that Snohomish things can go on for longer without the court getting um, impatient with people. In King County, you get 11 months, and if you don't seek a trial continuance, you better have something figured out, or you know, you're going to trial at month 11, and that's just the way that it is. Um, so I think duration for collaborative versus sort of traditional litigation is similar. I've had plenty of collaborative
Okay.
cases wrap up 3 months, bada boom, bada bing. I've had quite a few go a little bit longer than a year. I think most of them fall in that same 6 to 9 month range.
Yeah. Okay. And you were talking, I think based before we resumed part two, we were talking about collaborative law and polyamorous couples.
Hmm. So, and I touched on this a little bit during our first conversation about this during part one, because polyamory has only recently become mainstream enough that people are living openly enough that they're actually, I think, feeling comfortable coming to lawyers or seeking anything with, like, in terms of legal, maybe not recognition, but protections and structure. Um, I mean, not to put too fine a point on it, I think it had not enough time has passed for a lot of the polyamorous relationships that have taken on that sort of more formal approach to have broken up. They're still in the process where things haven't fallen apart, and they need to actually be then
Hmm.
disassembled and dealt with. I mean, it wouldn't be a divorce, right? Because they're, well, I mean, theoretically, some of them could be divorcing in a polyamorous relationship, but
Right.
um, the dissolution process, whether it's a dissolution of a marriage or of another type of committed intimate relationship, people have to have reason to break up before they need help with those things. And especially with the pandemic kind of putting a lot of things on hold, um, I haven't had occasion to bring a formal collaborative process to bear on a polyamorous breakup, because
Okay.
polyamorous breakups aren't, it's not that they don't happen very often, but the small subsection that I've pursued legal structure and protection, that subsection hasn't come back
Okay.
to being to needing legal support in breakups. And I think that's partly just a matter of time, but I also think it's because, and I'm speculating here, I think from a you know, I'm not guessing, more of a, you know, educated estimate, um, because polyamorous uh, polycules is the term that a lot will use for groups of more than two people.
What's that term again?
Polycule, like molecule, but with poly on the front. All
Oh,
right, a group of
polycule.
people with
Okay.
you know, connections and relationships. One of the sort of almost comically common traits of polyamorous families or polycules is a a tendency to spend tremendous amounts of time talking about the relationship, talking about relationship rules, talking about relationship dynamics, talking about scheduling, the calendaring that goes on. These are every single one of them calendaring experts. These people will do things with Google Calendars you didn't know were possible.
Okay, that seems extremely tiring for me. I can barely keep track of my own schedule and my kids' schedule. My husband basically takes care of the kids' schedule. I can't imagine trying to add one more person onto it. You've got to be extremely organized.
That, you know, I mean, I think maybe the most common reason that people stop being polyamorous is they can't handle the logistics. It's a huge demand on time. I mean, the other side of it is, though, that, you know, I mean, however many kids you have, imagine having an extra adult that's just a part of that family, right? Imagining having, you know, your spouse or your partner needs to, you know, has surgery or medical care needs, right? And all of a sudden there's another adult is there. They're having a crisis, a mental health crisis, or just they're sad, right? And you've got to work, so you can't be there with them, but maybe the other partner can. Like, it's right. You're adding, anytime you're adding people, the additional complexity is well, it's additional complexity, right? So it adds that. But I like to think about it a lot like furniture. Have you ever sat on a chair with two legs?
Have I ever sat on a furniture with two legs?
Sat on a chair with two legs?
No.
No. How about three?
No.
No? You never sat on like a three-legged stool?
Well, like a three-legged stool, yes.
Sure, but that'll stay up, right? You're not like balancing precariously, and you get four, and it's even more stable. I don't know. Once you get to five, maybe it gets a little weird, but you take my point, right? Like the additional people, it's harder to put together effectively, but once it's there, I think in a lot of ways it's more stable. And there's more ways that it can support the weight of whatever's on it. It's a little abstracted, I recognize.
I see. I get it.
Gosh, I think I've dragged us off track for the actual question again, though. Oh, right. Why have I not spent time doing disillusion of polyamorous relationships so much? So partly I think it's that people who are doing this, you know, long enough and effectively enough to even want to get those sort of more formal legal protections and structures in place are usually extremely practiced and often extremely good at communicating. And you know, being good at communication, it's really good for the longevity of a relationship, and also reduces the need for lawyers to be involved if the relationship breaks up, because they're more likely to be able to work it out.
Wow.
And then the other piece of it is, I think that, and it's sort of tangential, or at least related to that, is in order to get any legal protections or structure at all, polyamorous families have to think ahead. They have to put together, you know, the equivalent of a prenuptial agreement, right? Or a postnuptial agreement. It's basically relationship agreements. This is what we're doing with our money and our possessions and our debt, right? This is how we want to do parenting. This is how we want it all to work. And so if the relationship breaks up, they are way more likely than a more traditional couple to have put thought into their breakup, you know, towards the beginning of the relationship. And so I like to think that the reason I haven't spent, you know, significant time doing polyamorous breakups, not because they happen less often, but because polyamorous people put so much thought into their relationships and so much effort on the front end, they're not as likely to need help on the back end, if that makes sense.
No, that makes sense. So what do the polyamorous people need the help of an attorney for then? Is it like how you were saying, they need help doing maybe a prenuptial, which is before marriage agreement, or postnuptial, which is after marriage agreement? Is that what you're helping them with?
Yeah, that's what when I get to help polyamorous families, it's around kid stuff, like we talked about last episode, part one.
So kid stuff.
Kid stuff, like we talked about before, the de facto parentage and whatnot, which is, again, bleeding edge stuff in its own right. But what I've mostly actually ended up doing for people is simple estate planning and property and really property agreements, right? So
property agreements, okay.
right? These three people are getting into a relationship. Maybe two of them are married. Maybe they're not. Maybe none of them are married. Because just to be super clear for anybody watching or listening, is that it's still not legal to have more than one spouse in Washington state.
Thanks. Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah, you're not allowed to be married to more than one person at a time. But there's nothing that says you can't create a private contract between people about how three or more people will share property. And I've worked on that a bit. Okay. Simple estate planning. I don't do complex estate plans, but I absolutely do simple wills, and I will do powers of attorney, durable powers of attorney. And so that's one of the main things that I end up doing, right? Because one of the, not to take the romance out for anybody who didn't know it, but legally speaking, marriage is largely an economic arrangement. And so, with simple powers of attorney, three or more people can say, okay, both of my partners can exercise control or management of my funds, my resources, my bank accounts, if needed.
Should I become mentally incapacitated? Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. Okay.
It takes care of the, how do I visit my partners in the hospital?
Ooh,
thing, right?
Yeah, especially with COVID.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a whole nother layer there, right? Kind of nobody can there, but
nobody could
in the before times.
In the before times.
Yeah. If somebody's got your medical power of attorney,
right,
saying either of these people can, if I'm not able to, make medical decisions, whatever, it really helps sort of that access aspect of people who are stuck in the hospital. Are you family? Yes, I am. And having these documents really helps with that.
Well, especially in the sense that if the couples, the polycule, if you don't have a marriage, or if you have the polycule consists of a married couple and then a third person.
Right.
That would suck for the third person not to be able to participate in any type of medical decision making or see their critical ill spouse, because they don't they're not, because like you said, you can only have marriages defined between one, just two people. That's it in Washington.
Right.
Just two people.
Yeah, just two people. Yeah, the legal marriage is still that. And so, right, that's exactly it. The third or fourth or fifth or whatever, they're still as much a part of this person's life, and this person's in the hospital. How do we deal with that? So those are little ways that we can do it. We can sort of cobble together something not unlike marriage in a lot of ways in terms of legal structure and protections. I don't know of any great drive. I don't think there's a lot of activism behind trying to get plural marriage made legal in Washington state. There's a lot of social baggage there. But I hope one day we'll get to that point.
I don't think it just kind of feels like Utah's got plural marriages, right? And that's
I don't
kind
think
of
they
about
do anymore either. I don't think they.
Well, did they strike the law?
I don't know for sure, but I don't think so. I don't think it's become stupidly and unfairly, the notion of having multiple spouses is, I think, in a lot of people's minds, tied to polygamy, which is a man with multiple wives, many of whom, in sort of the imaginings, and there are real instances of this, of course, are underage girls, right? And that's not what polyamory is about at all. It leans very heavily on very modern concepts of consent, honestly. And I know at least as many polyamorous families where there are more men than women, and increasingly even that distinction is not particularly relevant or consistent, right? Like all sorts of non-binary folks or so the polyamory community is extremely diverse in that sense. So it really is. I think it's really unfortunate that so much of that social awareness has been so colored by the sort of religious culty, polygamy circumstance.
Dogma and stigma. And
the stigma.
It was, I happened to watch Real Housewives of Beverly Hills in Salt Lake City, because that's kind of like junk food for my brain. So especially being like, and it was really interesting because in Real Lives of Salt Lake City, they're showing this episode, and it was an Asian couple. They were from Vietnam, and he wanted more children with his wife, and his wife was like, no, I can't do it. She had like 13 she had 10 miscarriages or something. And she's like, and she was older. She didn't want to start over. So the husband said, well, why not a sister wife? And it was really interesting because I felt like, okay, they're from Utah. So yeah, sister wives, it's a thing. But no, it was a cultural thing. It was because back in Vietnam, that is a cultural thing. And he was saying that his grandfather had like multiple girlfriends, and everybody was happy and everybody got along and everybody got together well. And I guess that shows my naivete that, inside I'm thinking like sister wives and it's Utah and it's Mormons. But no, it's actually a thing for different cultures, and
Mhm.
it's not a big thing. And I thought, wow, that's so interesting. And it just kind of makes me realize in a sense, well, how much of it is the religious stigma that you have on
Mhm.
it, like the Judeo-Christian concept.
Mhm. Mhm.
So it's just kind of like, I don't know, if people can get along and it works,
I
why
mean,
not?
that's kind of my attitude about most things, frankly, is as long as as long as everybody's on board and everybody is giving informed consent,
Right.
go and do what you wish.
Informed consent. I think that's the key to it. So in terms of just going back again to the polyamorous polycules, then people will be coming to you for help with drafting a simple will, medical powers of attorney, financial powers of attorney,
Mhm.
property agreements. Now, would the property agreements include things such as like who pays for what? Like we should each contribute this much into the purchase, the maintenance, the mortgage of this property.
Sure. I mean, they can absolutely.
Okay.
I've done some like that. It's
Okay.
uh, I think that I mean, gosh, I hope this doesn't sound too cynical. Um, in general, I think the highest and best use of most sort of relationship property agreements isn't to manage the interior workings of the
Okay.
relationship. Right? I don't know if you do prenuptial agreements at all, Lonnie.
I do.
Yeah,
Pre and post.
yeah, yeah, right. And when I'm doing those, I don't generally, in fact, I try not to focus on whose income is being used for which things. It's a little
Mhm.
bit more reasonable to do that with non-traditional couples because there's less, well, there aren't any legal presumptions about community property or whatnot, right? If you don't have a marriage between everybody involved. Um, but still,
Right.
in the end, I find most people work it out however they're going to work it out during the
Okay.
relationship. And what they need is some kind of structure and sort of protections for when they break up and if they break up.
If they break up.
And so it's, in some ways, there's this. I usually have this conversation with people right up front when they come to my office. It's like, okay, listen, I have to proceed under the assumption that at least one of you is going to become a huge jerk in the future, and that you will not agree on stuff later on, because there's probably not much point in doing this agreement otherwise. Because if you all agree on stuff later on, you won't even need to look at it. You can do whatever you want. Um,
Right.
I think it's. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, right. That's funny. I have to presume that one of you is going to be a huge jerk in the future.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, because probably they won't. And again, I can't think of a single instance where I've seen them back either in my office or in the court system, which is not to say it hasn't
Really?
happened.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I really don't. And again, like I said before, I think it's because there's so much planning that goes into it and so much practice communicating that when the breakups do happen, they just don't need to seek that level of support. Or maybe they hated the work I did originally and they don't
Oh
come back
no,
to me and they're talking to somebody else and I don't know
I
about
doubt
it.
that.
Um, what was I going to say? The Right. So when I'm doing the sort of the agreements for people, it really is geared towards what happens if you break up. How are we going to divvy up stuff
Okay.
if the relationship fails? Um, and another thing, interestingly, because again, concomitant to me not getting these people back in my office for their breakups, there's this really interesting open question under the law. As you know about the committed intimate relationship doctrine.
Right.
Washington state, right? So in Washington state, we
Case
don't have,
law.
right. We don't have common law marriage, but we kind of don't have common law marriage with a wink and a nudge, right? Because if you live like you're married to somebody for long enough, and that's completely not defined anywhere, and then you break up, you can kind of be held to some of the same standards as if you were divorcing somebody. Not all of them, because that would also be too simple.
I mean, listen, I mean, committed intimate relationship is essentially common law marriage, but minus the fact that you cannot get spousal maintenance in a committed intimate relationship, because committed intimate relationship is created by case law,
right?
And the right to spousal maintenance is created by statute.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, but that's like the only difference. Otherwise, property and debts get divided. You can create a parenting plan, establish child support.
Mm-hmm. Right. So this is so one of the interesting outstanding questions that I really, if anybody watching or listening to this wants to be the test case, I'd love to help.
Yeah.
I want to find out if I can get a committed intimate relationship case by a person who's not married to someone else who is married to yet a third person.
Okay, right? So you've got Bob and Judy in a marriage.
Right.
And then you've got Sue. So Sue's in a committed intimate relationship with Bob.
Or with Bob and Judy. Was that the other one? I don't remember which names you used.
Yeah, Judy's a wife.
Yeah. Judy and Bob are married. Let's say Judy and Bob are married, and we've got Sam. Just because let's break those gender sort of presumptions about like it's all.
Okay, let's break the gender presumption. Sam,
right?
Yeah.
So Bob and Judy are married. Sam is in a relationship. Let's say with both of them. Let's say with both Bob and Judy, right? Committed intimate relationship. They're living together for a decade, right? Maybe there's some kids. Maybe not. Let's leave kids out of it for a minute. Just keep it a little bit simpler.
Yeah, that'd be simpler.
Yeah. So Bob and Judy and Sam is in a relationship with both of them. They're sharing their assets. They're buying houses together. They're doing all the things married people do.
Right.
And for whatever reason, Sam breaks up with let's assume both of them. Also keep it simpler, because it's even weirder if Sam like only breaks up with Judy but is still seeing Bob. So let's assume Sam's out of the relationship. What's Sam's recourse, right? Because if Sam was just in an unmarried relationship with either Bob or Judy, it's easy. Committed intimate relationship petition. We treat it a lot of the ways like a marriage. Can we do that if the other parties are married to each other or married to somebody else? I don't know. There's nothing in the law that I've ever been able to find that requires a committed intimate relationship to be an exclusive relationship. There are really good reasons historically why that shouldn't be the case. So I want this case because I think that it is a really interesting thing to do. And it may have happened. This is the other strange thing, because again, as you know, case law comes out of appeals.
True.
Right? So if cases are happening and resolving and everybody's more or less okay or doesn't have the money with the to take it up on appeal, we won't ever hear about it. It's not going to be in any of the unless you're going to go comb the court records for the public records to see. I don't have time for it. I know you don't. So I mean, I don't know if anybody has had that circumstance come up. I'd love to hear from them. Please give me a call. I want to hear how it went. And if anybody's in that circumstance and you're wondering, I want to say, I think legally speaking is a perfectly good standing to bring a committed intimate relationship case if you're breaking up with a couple or with somebody who's in a marriage. And I think these are the kinds of questions that are again, this is bleeding edge family law for the real nerds out there. Oh my God, I can't believe I just said that out loud. There's just so many things that we just don't know how it's going to play out yet, because it's the even the ability to publicly approach a question like this through the courts is so the social acceptance of non-monogamy has just within the last decade, I think, become sufficiently high that I think people can kind of come out and try to seek these sorts of remedies comfortably.
The family law nerd in me too is just dying to see how this will play out too.
Yeah.
So if you have like a Sam out there that comes to you seeking to dissolve a committed intimate relationship on this, please keep me in the loop.
Within the
Oh,
confines of attorney-client confidentiality and privilege, I'm happy to. I'd love to
yes,
tell
you
you how
can't.
that goes.
Yeah, you cannot spill the details, but
No,
you
no,
can just generally
yeah, I've got this case and
generalizations.
these things are happening. Yep.
Yeah, just very generalizations about cases. That's what we can discuss.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and so you said simple wills too, right? So that simple
Mm-hmm.
wills, like I usually consider simple wills a state under $1 million. You've got like a prop, you've got one home,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
retirement
I do. Excuse me. Everybody's gonna think I have COVID. I just made poor lunch choices. The simple wills, I mean, for me, I'm not an estate planning person. I have a lot of experience doing complex stuff. I'm not trying to help avoid estate taxes or anything like that. But
Right, same here.
one of the other things that comes with marriage is if you die without a will and you're married, your spouse gets most of what you had sort of by default, right? And
Right.
that's how that works. And that doesn't happen if you're in a relationship with somebody and not married. And so per force, if you're in a polyamorous relationship, at least two of those people aren't married to each other, or at least one of those people isn't married to either of the other people. And so how do you protect that? How do you protect that sort of in the case of somebody dying? And so simple wills are a great way to handle that. In fact, I think the only way to handle that. For more complicated, gosh, I'm giving all these like shout outs and sort of plugs for people. For more complicated estate planning, because that can be useful too. I have a person that I refer people out to, Zana Gerson. Zan Gerson, I think she just goes by Zan. If I got it wrong, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Zan. Zan Gerson, Gerson. She's fantastic. She's a very skilled estate planner, and I've worked with her on a couple of different cases with polyamorous families, and I really respect her work. So she's my go-to person if it's like, oh, this is a little above my pay grade for this aspect of things.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Nathan, for filling us in on collaborative law and also how just, giving us that basic rundown about how legal, what is it, what I'm trying to say here? I'm trying to think of the term, just in terms of just polyamorous couples in general, and what are the legal solutions and remedies out there to help them define relationships or rights and duties that they're sometimes overlooked within the more traditional standards of relationships, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean,
And
thanks. I'm sorry, go on.
no, go ahead.
I was going to thanks for having me on and asking the question. I appreciate not only the time to get to chat with you, but also I like visibility on these things. I think there's a lot of people out there in non-traditional relationships that it maybe doesn't even occur to them that they could talk to a lawyer or seek
Right.
that kind of help, and just raising the profile of that sort of issue, I think is great. So thank you for that too.
Yeah, and if you do go to court to get this de facto parentage established for the couple, you said is it four parents?
It's for parents. Yep.
Okay, gosh, you're definitely gonna have to, when that is done, maybe come back and let us know how it went.
Yeah, I would love to do that. I'll talk to the family. It's rare enough. I think I wouldn't want to accidentally out somebody just by sort of process of elimination, right? But
Yeah, of course not.
I bet they'd love that actually, and being able to let me share a little bit of their story, I think would probably please them. So I'm happy.
Are you gonna? How about this? How about you try and do it in the new year?
It's gonna depend. I mean, like I said, the weird thing is this. I don't want to trying and failing is almost in some ways a riskier proposition than waiting to try. And I'm like, as soon as we can get back in the courthouse in person, I'm going to be, talking to this family, like, all right, we're back in the courthouse, let's go do it, because it's not going to get better than that, right? But
Right.
until then, I'm still really hesitant. But I'll be honest, I'm a little nervous at when we're going to be back in the courthouse physically, at least in King County. Maybe I'll take out.
I don't get why King County is still not doing it in person.
It's I don't know. I won't speculate. I won't speculate
No
on that.
speculation.
We're pretty uptight down here in King County about COVID, I think is maybe the right answer. And I'm not going to weigh in one way or the other on how I feel about that. I have mixed feelings. I got a young kid at home who can't be vaccinated, so I'm
Oh.
a little on the uptight side myself. But
Hmm.
systemically, it does seem to be presenting an awful lot more problems than it's solving sometimes. But I don't know.
Oh, that's interesting. And I looked it up in the de facto parentage. It became statute January 1st, 2019.
Okay, cool.
So
Thought I had that.
yeah, it hasn't been that long at all. It's not
No.
even a year.
It's been
Oh, I'm sorry, 2019.
it's
You know
going
what?
on 3 years.
I got the Moderna booster the other day on Wednesday, and
Uh-huh.
I'm feeling the effects.
Oh, I'm sorry. I
Yeah.
mean, worth it. Good job. And yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, no, it's been almost 3 years, but I mean, your point is still, extremely valid. It takes time for stuff to happen in the law, right? People start having problems, and it can take a year or several years for them to resolve. And even if even if they do resolve, we might not have case law about it because nobody
Right.
appealed. And if it does appeal, there's another year or two before we get that. So, yeah, so this is all really interesting, again, for legal nerds or polyamory nerds, I suppose, and cutting edge family law stuff. So again, thank you again for coming in, for having me come on and help raise visibility about this.
Well, thank you so much, Nathan, for your time. And tell us what is, and again, so people can get a hold of you at Seattle Divorce Services.
Mm-hmm.
And then do you want to say the phone number?
Yeah, sure. The Seattle Divorce Services, our office is located in Ballard. We're doing almost everything. We really are doing everything remote. So even if you're not in the area, can't make it to our office, we can do a Zoom meeting. Phone number is 206-784-3049. And if you're watching this or listening to this and you really like me, this is where I work. But I'll be honest, every single attorney at this office is amazing. We're a small firm. There are, right now we have 5 attorneys. We just hired on a new gal, just joined us. But I would trust anybody here with my own legal issues. And everybody here focuses on family law. So it's just a great crew.
And this is Nathan Kleiber, and Kleiber is spelled Cliber. And Nathan, I've got to know, what is your most favorite musical? I mean, that you've done.
Oh, that I've done?
Theater days.
God, you're killing me.
What was your favorite performance
that I personally have given?
Well, that if you could go back, like if someone said, Nathan, we need you here to star in this Seattle production, what would it be?
Wow. I was in a lot of good shows in college, but I was in Into the Woods near the end of my time at Western Washington University up in Bellingham. I was in Into the Woods, and I got to play Cinderella's Prince and the Wolf.
Oh,
that was more fun than anybody should be allowed to have. That was a great time.
Oh, okay. So that's the production you would do again?
I mean, I'd do a lot of them again, but I think if I had to pick a favorite, that'd probably be where it was. I also loved, I was in Hair. That was a great one.
Oh, you're in Hair?
Yeah.
Oh gosh, I love that. For the listeners out there, Nathan just rubbed his shiny head.
Yeah, I'm all shaven bald now.
Because he's shaven,
yeah. Clean
shaven, like Mr. Clean. Okay. Well, if you happen to restart your musical career again, just as a side hobby, please let me know.
Well, absolutely, sure.
I'd love to come out and see you and support you. All right. Thank you so much again, Nathan, for being on the show. And thank you for all the listeners out there. And join us for the next episode of Akiona Law Podcast, wherein we discuss all things that relate and intersect with the areas of divorce and family law. Till next time, stay safe and stay healthy. Thank you.
The information in this podcast is general advice only and should not in any respect be relied on as specific legal advice.